What's happening, guys? If you clicked on this video, yes, we are going to be talking about lipless crankbaits today. This past week, I caught over 35 pounds on my top 5 fish on fishing a lipless crankbait. So let's hop in. First, let me show you the scale so you don't think I'm lying. Let's turn the bad boy on. I'm going to try to turn it on an angle for you, but hopefully you can see that. Different angles just so the glare is not affecting it. But if you can see that first fish, you saw it right, a 10.5. So our very first fish within the first 20 minutes, we caught a 10.5 on a lipless crankbait. Alright guys, once selecting a lipless crankbait, I keep it super simple. I either have a chrome, white, or even a natural color, somewhat similar to this crappie color right here. Now, usually in the summertime, leading up into the fall, or the wintertime, I usually love like a bluegill color or a crappie colored or something that looks more natural with like a design somewhat similar to this right here. And these are super cheap. These are actually Academy's brand, the H2O Express. They are about like $3. Now when you go into like the Strike King lures and the 6 Sense lures and all these other lures that I may have on here that you can see, you know, you're starting to get a little bit pricey. Now, I don't have a specific brand that I recommend. I just recommend that you guys go out there, you fish several baits, and build some sort of confidence in it to where, you know, you'll start purchasing baits that you have confidence in. Now these H2O Express baits, they're super cheap, and then on top of that, it's very durable. Like the paint never comes off of it, and the hooks and all them other little gizmos and gadgets that come on this lipless crankbait are super strong. Like I've never had any problems with them. So if you guys do have an Academy close by, I highly recommend them. And then the Strike King Red Eye Shad, that is like the staple. Like everybody goes to the Red Eye Shad. And now if you can see the back of that right there, it actually is a 2-tap. It actually has a different sound. So now that we talked about the color, let's talk about the size. Now this is a 1/2 ounce. Never hear a helicopter ever. Guys, I have this tackle box right here, and it is filled with lipless crankbaits, and there's some of all sorts of colors and all sorts of brands. But, you know, we need to start staying away from looking at something and be like, ooh, I think the fish really likes this bait. Because we need to keep it super simple. You ever hear it called match the hatch, or a saying called match the hatch? Well, it's exactly what you need to do. When you catch a shad, or you accidentally hang into a shad, or you what do they call that, a throw net shad, when you see them, they're usually like a shinier color, somewhat similar to like this chrome color, or some sort of white color that has like some sort of like weird color that shines off of it, somewhat similar to this white one that has a little bit of like purple to it. But we need to keep it super simple. Getting the ones that look like clowns, that have the oranges and the blues and the greens and just like multicolored ones, they may look good to us, but when have you ever saw a shad that looked like that? You don't. So just keep it simple. The chrome color, white, or something natural. Also now comes into play is this right here, and it all depends on, I guess, how you fish it. If you're dragging it on the bottom, or you're popping it off the bottom, or you're even yo-yoing it, it kind of somewhat sort of looks like a crawfish, and crawfish are usually these colors, especially within the transition of the wintertime going into the spring. So that's going to be a huge factor. I've never had much luck on an orange one, but I'm actually going to go ahead and consider it these next couple of weeks, because everybody is talking about the winter to spring transition and how red will play a huge factor. So I'm definitely going to try that. So let's talk about the technique. Now, a lot of guys will just throw that out there and just have a steady retrieve. And sometimes, and some days, that's okay. I've caught huge fish, huge bass, on just a regular retrieve. And I guess that depends on the condition you're fishing. For example, with a steady retrieve, if the wind's blowing really, really hard against like a wind-blown bank or over a point, a steady retrieve could trigger those fish to bite. But let's say you go back the next day and you try to do the same thing and you're doing a steady retrieve and it's not working. You either one, think you might need to change the color, you may need to change the size, or you just think it's not working. Well, sometimes that's not the case. A lot of the times, I don't know if you guys heard people say before, let the fish tell you how you need to fish it. For example, a lot of guys talk about that on a jerkbait. And what I mean by that is like the cadence or the retrieve. Some people will say jerk, jerk, pause, jerk, 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 pause. And they say alter your retrieve until those fish tell you how you want it. So when you're out there fishing your lipless crankbait and you're just on that steady retrieve and you're not catching them, you might need to change up your retrieve. You may need to change up the color, but 9 times out of 10, the lipless crankbait is going to be a reaction strike. You put that in front of them, I don't think, no matter what the color is, they're going to try to get it just to see what it is. So vary your retrieve. In this video that I'm going to show you, I'm catching, let me see, that 10.5. I think there was a, let's see, a 5.6, a 7.6, a 6.15, which is an ounce shy of a 7-pounder, and then a 5-pound even. And I caught them all on the same retrieve. Now, I've caught fish on a steady retrieve. One of my favorite is a stop and go retrieve. So you throw it out there. Now, depending on where those fish are in the water column will depend on how far down you fish it. So I would throw it out there if they're suspended at about 5 foot. I'll let it sink down in about 5 seconds. And once it gets into that range, I'm going to start reeling. I'll reel and then I pause it. Reel it really fast, pause it. Maybe reel it slow, pause it. And a lot of the times on that pause, as soon as you start to reel it back in, and as you will see on this video, they hit it as soon as you start to take back off. And what my theory is behind that is that when you're reeling it and you're doing something weird, they're coming up and they're getting really curious and they want to see exactly what that bait or that whatever it is doing. So they're watching it, they're getting really close to it, and it might stop and they go down to it. If you have it pause for a long enough time, I think they're nose down and they're looking at it. And once you rip that up, they get too excited, and there's just something inside them, their instincts, that says that they just need to go ahead and get that. And they usually get it either when you yo-yoing it up after that initial pause, or once you reel it and you stop it and you reel it again and try to get it away from them. That's usually when they go ahead and attack it. So there's so many different retrieves out there. You need to make sure that you're trying all the retrieves before you give up on this bait. This bait right here has probably caught so many fish over the years, especially with all the Elite Series guys, bank fishermen, anybody that fishes a lipless crankbait, they'll probably have some story on it of how they've caught giant fish. And I've caught huge fish, and I've caught 10-pounders, as you will be able to see in this video. I'll post it up in a second, or show you guys in a second, along with some of the other catches. But that bait right there is fire, and that's exactly why I have about 75 of them in this this tackle box, because once you go and you've caught several really, really good fish on it, we all think it's the magical bait, so we fill up on them. And over the years, I've noticed that just sticking to chrome, sticking to a white color, or even a natural color, somewhat similar to like a bluegill or this crappie right here, is fine. You don't need to go beyond that. But so in the videos, you will see that I will be stop, go, retrieve. I will be fishing a stop and go retrieve, and then on top of that, fishing it like a yo-yo. And what I mean by yo-yo, this is another really good technique in the wintertime, especially with these lethargic bass. They're not really trying to chase anything super fast. But when you yo-yo, you take your rod, you reel it just a tad bit, let it hit bottom, and then you rip it up. So what it's going to do is it's going to be hitting bottom, you rip it up, it flickers up, and then it has a slow fall. You rip it up, and then a slow fall. And a lot of those times, they either hit it on that fall, or once it's on the bottom and you rip it up, they can't resist but chase that bait and stick it in their mouth, and you set that hook. But the retrieve that I was doing was I threw it out, and I was winding in. So I threw it out, and I started to do the stop and go retrieve, and then I added the yo-yo onto it. So I was reeling it, stopping it, letting it go, ripping it, stop and go retrieve. And a lot of the times, I would reel it and stop it. As you watch, pay attention to the retrieve. A lot of the times when I stop where I'm like looking at something, or I point at something, or I fix the trolling motor, my initial pickup or my initial crank, that's when I get bit. So pay attention to that. So as you're fishing, sometimes create a longer or use a longer pause, and then start bringing that bait in immediately or a little bit quicker than you normally do, and then slow it down. So the stop and go retrieve with a yo-yo was fire. It was lights out. All right, so let's talk about where I was catching these fish. So I was throwing the lipless crankbait the week before, and I was actually close to the bank. So I was fishing pretty shallow. So I tried it again this week, and it wasn't working for me. So I actually backed off into some deeper water, throwing toward key locations. And where I caught that 10-pounder is actually, I was coming up to this this bank that was actually a ledge to a spawning flat, and I was coming up, and I was actually going to drift down because the wind was blowing from the south, and I was coming down, or I was going up to the north side, I guess you can say, and there was a huge main lake point right there, and it actually comes out into some deeper water that you wouldn't be able to see unless you were using your electronics. So as I was going up to that that area that I was fishing, I was coming up on that ledge, and I saw some huge fish. I'll actually show you a picture of it. You should be able to see it right here as I'm coming up on this bank. If you're looking at my fish finder, you'll be able to see it, but it's a picture, and you'll be able to see those big fish on my fish finder. So I actually drifted down a little bit to where when I cast, I can actually come over them instead of trying to drop down on their head and maybe spooking them. So in the video, I'm fishing this ledge, and like I said, it had deep water access, came up really shallow to a spawning flat, really, really shallow, and then it had a lot of vegetation around that, so it has a lot of key ingredients, so you can say, to produce these really big fish, as you will be able to see in this video. So I throw out, I'm throwing into the wind, and I'm bringing it back down toward me, fishing parallel to that ledge, and as you can see, I'm fishing that like a yo-yo style. I'm stop and go, letting it sink, and yo-yoing it, and a lot of the times, when you're in an area where there's a lot of fish, you might even run into fish to where you feel like they may bite, and you'll be able to see in the video too, I've set the hook several times either running into a fish or something swatting at that fish, or I'm sorry, swatting at my bait. And one of the times, I guess I go through a bunch of fish, and I felt fish, and I was like, oh man, I thought I had a bite. As soon as it dropped, my rod started to load, and that's when I set the hook and caught that 10-pounder. So I was fishing ledges and main lake points, and then another thing that I was fishing was something that actually came off the bank. So one of the banks that I was fishing, and you'll be able to see it in these videos, is that there's a really long stretch of bank that was super straight, and then toward the end of it, it kind of like buckled out a little bit. I guess it had a small little point, and the point came out underwater as well. I know that due to my electronics. So as I was coming down there, I was just pitching the Lipless Crankbait, the 2-tap, and I kept feeling like fish thump it, and I actually catch a fish as I let it sink all the way to the bottom. He picked it off the bottom, and I set the hook. But you know, fishing the Lipless Crankbait could be a stellar bait, especially in these cold winter months. And a lot of people say, you know, they only fish the Lipless Crankbait on certain times of the year. Guys, I've had luck fishing a Lipless Crankbait all year. The summertime, the spring, anytime I can put this in my hand and I feel like it's a good time, I mean, it's a confidence bait of mine, so I'm going to have it tied on majority of the times that I go fishing. I'm going to have one either close by or have one tied on depending on, you know, how I feel or looking at the conditions. I'm going to have one tied on because this bait is fire, as you can see in these videos. Alright, so let's talk about the hooks. I've fished these for years and years and years and never had any trouble with the hook. From time to time, because I wasn't fishing the right rod, I was bending out these hooks, so then I reverted to another hook. And that is the Mustad Ultra Point Kevin Van Dam Elite Treble Hook. And it's two times short, 1 time strong, and it is the size 4. And you're going to pick this hook depending on the size of your bait. So if you have a half ounce, I would suggest like a size 4. If you're fishing anything smaller than that, like these little Lipless Crankbaits here, you probably want like a size maybe 6 or something a little bit smaller. But the size 4 is probably standard for your half-ounce Lipless Crankbaits. But, you know, these hooks right here, it actually has a back bend to it, to where when you do penetrate that hook, you know, it's going to be a lot harder for that fish to pull that hook out because it's more hooked, so you can say. So I've never had any trouble with them. And like I said, I have bent out these hooks, and it's probably because I'm horsing them fish. I get overly excited, and I don't have the right rod. So changing out your hooks could be a key thing. Now, it doesn't have to be a Mustad hook. Any kind of hook that's just a little bit shorter, somewhat similar to this, and then it had that back hook to it. I call it like an eagle claw, because like if an eagle goes like this, its nails kind of like hook back. So like an eagle claw type hook, as you can see right here. All right, so let's get to the rod. Alright, so let's get to the rod. I just actually purchased this rod and I absolutely love it. The first time I was fishing it was in the videos that I'm showing you now, and I caught all my fish on this rod. And I'm not saying this is a magical rod. I probably could have caught them on a different rod too. But it helped out tremendously, and I'll let you know exactly why. This is the Micro Magic Pro. It is a 7'6" medium heavy cranking rod. And cranking is very important when you're picking a medium heavy powered rod. And I'll tell you exactly why. My past couple videos, sometimes I get a little brain dead when I'm out there fishing, and I know that if I fish a medium powered heavy rod, that if I'm fishing any kind of treble hook, my percentage of bringing that fish in is a lot lower than if I was fishing a medium powered rod. And the reason why I say that is because when you have a medium heavy rod, when you're fighting that fish and he's jumping up out of the water, your rod tip strength comes back so much faster and so much stronger, to where if you had a medium powered rod, the flex is so much more, I guess you can say, noodly. I guess David Dudley, if you watch any of his videos, he talks about a pull noodle of a rod for a medium powered rod. It's just hilarious. But it is a little bit more limber, and with it being limber, it actually assists you in fighting that fish. So they're not pulling on your line too hard. You're not probably going to bend out any of your treble hooks depending on how hard you're horsing them, but allowing the rod to do a lot of the work for you fighting wise helps out tremendously on landing those fish. So this rod right here is that 7'6" medium heavy cranking rod. Now all my other rods that I have that I fish with treble hooks, they are actually 7-foot rods, medium powered. But like I said, I've had the best luck fishing medium powered rods, or this medium powered or medium heavy powered cranking rod to bring those fish in and help fight those fish. My line size, I usually stick to about 12-pound line. Now, I used to fish about 14 or 15 pound, excuse me, and it was fine, but I'm getting a little bit further of a cast, especially with the long rod, and then with thinner line. So with the thinner line, I'm getting further cast. The further you cast, the more water you cover, and the better your chances are of catching those fish. Alright, so let's talk about the reel. My reel, when I'm fishing a lipless crankbait, now depending on the water temperature and the season, will depend on which reel I use, or the speed of the reel I use. If it's in the summertime, I want a really fast rod to create that reaction strike. So I'm fishing probably like a 7-1 or a 7, maybe 7.4, maybe a 7.6. I forget what the range is, but it's in the 7s. And then now with, you know, fishing a little bit slower, a 6.6 or a 6.4 to 1 gear ratio is my ideal speed to go to. This is the Revo SX. This is a 6.6 to 1 gear ratio. The castability is insane, and this is probably my first reel that I've ever had by Abu Garcia, and I just fell in love with Abu Garcia. So it doesn't matter what reel you use. Just go out there and practice and fish and use what I guess works best for you. Because I see a lot of guys say that they love a high speed reel about in the 8s. Sometimes I use a 7, and I absolutely love to use a 6.4 to 1 or a 6.6 to 1. So it's just personal preference, but that's my setup. It's what works for me. I'm going to throw it out a little bit deeper this time. So the water temperature is 52 degrees, almost 53. The wind's coming from the south. We have overcast conditions, and it was about 50 degrees when we got here. The morning started off about mid-30s, probably, you know, close to 40. Oh my God, we just got smoked just talking. So the conditions seem to be really good. And I think the wind's supposed to peak out about 15 miles an hour. Guys, we're having something on this ledge. I have 3 bumps already. I'm gonna go just a little bit further out. But the last time we were here, I was fishing the Lipless Crankbait, and we lost a giant, literally bent out my hook. And I was fishing a medium heavy powered rod, which with my experience has been awful. I love a medium powered rod to where that rod bends and actually assists you in that fight. So, you know what rod I have on today on my Lipless Crankbait? I actually have a medium heavy powered rod, but it's 7.6 and it's a cranking rod, so it's got a lot of flex to it, somewhat similar to a medium powered rod. I usually use 7-foot rod, so it's very similar to that. It's just a little bit longer. It's actually probably going to help me cast it just a little bit further too. So we'll see what happens. Try a different retrieve. I want to just kind of crank it, pull it, and just kind of stop it. We're running in something right there. There it is right there. There he was. He inhaled it. He is literally trying to get that lure out of his mouth. Lipless Crankbait. See if we can keep him about to jump. Oh, he is a giant. A giant. Hopefully he can stay on there. Coming up. He's got it choked too, so. Ready, so we can get him. Coming up again. Easy. Woo! It's a giant, guys. Oh God. It's probably 10 or 11 pounds. We're about to see though. I don't know if you can see that. We're about to see real quick. Whew, I am shaking. Oh my God, I am shaking. All right, so let's see. 10:20. I had 10:36. Wow. Guys, we just caught a 10:36
Look at this giant, a 1036 on the first fish. Sucked it right off the bottom. He feels big, but he may be foul hooked. No, he's not. Flexible rod is keeping that tension on this fish and doing a lot of the work. We got her. Another really good fish, guys. Let's see how that right there on her face. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. Right there. It might be 6 to 7 pounds. I'll just weigh her out. Bigger than I thought it was. 740. And guys, I know you're not probably going to be able to see this, but if you look at the mouth and the redness that's inside there, you can tell how cold that water is. So these fish can still be caught. You just got to put the time in. I'll let her go. Goes. Now, down along this bank right here, you can see this. Maybe you can. I know the sun is probably glaring off the screen, but we have a long bank, and then once it gets to about right here, it actually starts to bow out. Now, with that wind coming down here, what that could create is maybe like an eddy or something right there that the bass can stage on, to where those bait fish come down along the bank. When they come around that, you know, they can feed on them. And as y'all saw, we were fishing that for a little bit, and we had a couple really good bumps. Now, I don't know if I was running into structure, but it really did feel like it was a bass kind of either swatting at it, or I ran into a bass, because I felt like a weird little thump, somewhat similar to what that would feel like. But right there, we were reeling it in, kind of yo-yoed it, and then when I went to reel back to feel where the bait was, I couldn't feel the bait, so he must have bit it off the bottom once it got to the bottom when I was reeling that slack in, and he was coming out here to our left-hand side. Oh, he slammed it right there again. There it is again. probably about like a 3-pounder or so. Not overly huge. He's a little smaller, but he is chunky. Look at that gut. I'm gonna hurry up and try to get back out there. We had 2 bites back to back. Right there, so there's another one, guys. And what's he got coming out of his mouth? Let's see if we can get it. So sometimes when you catch fish, look down in their gullet. You may be able to see what they're feeding on. And guys, I see a shad right now. I don't know if I'll be able to get it out. And I hate doing this. Maybe I can just show you his mouth. Look at that. I don't know if you can see it in there, but there's a tail sticking out of his throat. And when I look at the tail, it looks black, almost somewhat similar to a shad. We're throwing a shad imitator. Can't beat that. Be observant sometimes when you're catching them. 246. Sweet. 246. He gone. So now we're at, what are we at? 2566. 2586 was what we had last time. So let's get it back out there. I'm yo-yoing this. I actually feel I'm ticking it when it's dropping. Switch the baits up in a second. If I got something on, the bait just kind of got twisted. Yeah, it got twisted up. So I'm glad we came down here. Now sometimes when you're reading, sometimes you're watching the Elite Series guys and they say look for things that are a little bit different. So you come down this bank like this and then it buttons out just a little bit and then goes back in. So that little buttoned area right here is something different to where, you know, those fish may, you know, stage up on or feed up on, or just kind of just hang out there until it's time to feed. And if you have the right bait, you can entice them sometimes. Here. Now, I don't know if they're feeding or not. Oh my gosh, guys. They are slamming it. Here's one. Oh man, he feels good. Oh yeah, he's good. He's probably about 4 pounds or so. Whoa, 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 whoa. Come back, come back, come back, come back, come back, come back. You're scared. Alright, we got it. Oh God, he's freaking out. Relax, 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 relax. I've never been caught before. But I think he has been because he got a blind eye. Guys, this fish absolutely choked it. Choked it. Let's see if I can get him to stay still. But look at that. Choked choked it. I hope he's okay. The last thing I want is him to be hurt. Guys, there is another shad in this fish's mouth. Another one. Let's see what we got. 504. 504. Alright. Chunky monkey.
Well, there you have it, guys. We talked about the color, talked about size, talked about hooks, talked about the rod and reel and the line size, and hopefully all this stuff helped. Guys, continue to follow Bass on